Episode 2, On the Cusp, in the car. I'm sitting in the car in downtown Nashville. I've got a gig here in just a little bit. I'm about to play. But in this episode, I'm going to take you through when I was on the cusp of moving to this great city and what it took to finally push me over the hump to get me here. You know, there's a lot of things I think we run into these times in life where we have a huge decision and maybe we want to make this decision. We want to do something different, do something huge, but it's inconvenient and it's scary and we can't predict the future. So out of nervousness, we keep kicking the can down the road and we eventually let go of it. Well, that almost happened to me. I almost never moved here. I actually remember the night that was the most pivotal moment before I came here. When I say here, I'm right here in downtown Nashville. I used to live in Orlando, Florida. And this was from fall of 2004 to the summer of 2005. I was 20 years old, and I worked at a theme park. No, it wasn't Disney. No, it wasn't Universal. It wasn't SeaWorld. It was a theme park, though, in Orlando. It's called the Holy Land. That's right, a Bible-based theme park in Orlando, Florida. I had a job there as a security guard. I worked all night. I think it was about 5 nights a week. And I loved my job. I mean, first of all, this theme park is pretty awesome. I thought it was great. People make fun of it when I tell them the story, but I mean, you can't beat this place. So you walked in as like the Middle East, you know, with the music just playing. I mean, I've never been to the Middle East, but I'm sure you're walking around and you got that music kind of in the background, right? I mean, I've been to the Holy Land in Orlando. So I just remember how exciting it was, man. You had all this excitement and shows. Man, they had shows every day. They'd crucify Jesus twice a day, once at 2 p.m., once at 4:30. If you missed the early show, you could catch him get killed at 4:30, and he'd rise again twice a day, just as well as they'd kill him. So he'd come on out of the tomb, and it was exciting every single time. I'll never forget that Jesus, though, that actor. He had a sports car, and he really thought he was something. When he took that outfit off, he's just cruising around his sports car. I'd let him in and out as a security guard, and he was kind of snooty to me. So I think he needed to practice what he was preaching a little bit more. But anyway, I was also excited to have a job where I would walk people across the street, and they didn't care about the dudes. That our security team was told, the men, they can find their own cars. But we definitely have to walk the girls across the street, which is a young 20-year-old boy, single. I guess I was a man at the time, but, you know, it was pretty cool. I got to walk Mary Magdalene across the street every evening, and that was about the most exciting part of my day. And so anyway, that was a good time there. And I'd go down to Wendy's after everybody left, and I was the only one left on the property. I had the keys. I'd go down to Wendy's there, get me a double cheeseburger, and come back and hang out in the guard shack. But I didn't just sit there all night and just waste the night away. No, sir, I worked. So my job was to walk around the park once every hour and make sure everything was okay. And so I did. I'd walk through there and check in on the animals. And you see, they had these Middle Eastern animals there. They had goats and camels and sheep. Whatever you see in the baby Jesus picture, the manger scene, whatever them animals were, that's what they had there. So I'd check on them. I didn't have to water them or feed them or nothing. That was somebody else's job. I'm glad. But, you know, I'd move on through there. There was a piano on one of the stages. I remember I'd unarm the building. It was armed, locked. I'd go unlock it, unarm it, call the security company. Yep, it's just me. They go, okay. I'd go in there, and I'd sit at the piano for an hour and play and write songs. And I was really becoming a songwriter there. And I'd get my guitar out in the guard shack and play. And I noticed there was a pond on the property there. Really, really nice pond. And I'd get there, before the sun set when everybody was still there. And I started noticing some big old fish flopping around out there in that pond. I said, man, what kind of fish is out there? And they said, oh, it's stocked. I don't know. It's some kind, And I said, them big goldfish, big carp in there. So the next night I brought me a fishing pole. And my best friend, Parker, he did the same thing. And we sat there and fished. Then I figured out what I could do is I could sit in the guard shack with my combo TV. I had me a combo TV that rode in the passenger side of my car. I lift that thing out of there and carry it into the guard shack and plug it in. I had a VCR in it. And I'd rent movies at the Hollywood Video. I could get 3 at a time. And I had just about enough time to watch all 3 of them every night. So Clint Eastwood. I was like, man, Mama never let me watch these movies, but I'm going to watch every one of them now. So I'm watching Clint Eastwood and John Wayne and eating Wendy's. I mean, what a life. Walking Mary Magdalene across the street. This is great. Setting my fishing pole. I stuck it out the window of the guard shack and run the line all the way out to the pond, and I could feel them tugging on the line every now and then. And I never really did catch one from that far away, but that would have been a cool story. I should have just told you I caught one, but I didn't. So I'm sitting here writing these songs, and I'm recording them on my laptop, which, those recordings sucked tremendously. But I was trying to figure out, what am I? I think I'm a songwriter. I think I'm a musician. And I'd play them back. I'd say, that don't sound half bad. Of course, it sounded horrible, but I didn't know. My best friend, Parker, he beat me down to Florida. He actually moved there. He's the reason I was there. So we lived, we lived in North Carolina before Florida, and I tell people we grew up together, but the truth is, our parents were friends before we were born, and then our family moved away, and our families were basically apart all the way until our teenage years. And then we came back to North Carolina, and we actually became friends at that time. So through our teenage years, we played ball together, went to church camp together, and became just the best of buds. And he moved to Florida. He felt like God was calling him to be a youth pastor and be in ministry. I really didn't know what God was calling me to. And you see, I graduated homeschool, and that was a big thing. I remember the day I graduated homeschool, I was a class of 1. It's 2002, May. I finished reading the book. It was the last book I had for school, and I was like, "Hey, Mama, is there anything else I need to do?" She's like, "Yeah, that's the last book. You're done." And she went over there and printed out my diploma on the printer, handed it to me, and that was a big moment right there. So I did entertain the idea of joining the Army. I remember I went to Walmart. I was about 18, and this guy was following me around, telling me about, he was a recruiter, and it sounded like a good idea. And I was very patriotic, and 9/11 had just happened, and I was thinking, you know what? I'd kind of like to go get those bad guys. But my grandpa had secured a job for me. He delivered paint across the Piedmont Triad area of North Carolina there, Greensboro, High Point, Winston-Salem. And in Greensboro at Rice Toyota, he called me one day from their phone and said, "Hey, Adam, I've got you a job up here at Rice Toyota. Come see Jeff Smith." I said, "Grandpa, do what now?" He said, "I got you a job." And I had just graduated like 15 minutes ago. And I said, "Wow, I got a job that fast?" He said, "Yeah, just come up here." I said, "Doing what?" He said, "Washing cars." I said, "That sounds good." Now, I had opened the book to the technical college, the local college there, and I'd flipped through all them pages of stuff I could do there. I thought about going to college. And I'm looking at all these different jobs. Let's see, engineer. No, I don't want to do that. Let's see, marketing. What is that? I don't even know what that is. I just remember sitting here going through this thing. My mom wasn't even there for that. I think she said I could do whatever, I could do any of that. My dad encouraged me to do that. But I'm looking through this book, and man, I don't see anything I want to do. Let's see, accounting. No, I don't want to do that. Doctor. No. I ain't going to do that. And I just shut the book and was like, well, I don't know. I'll just go wash cars. And I got down there and got a job right away. And they teamed me up with Carlos down there in the wash pit. And the wash mitt fit as I stood in the wash pit. And I just made that up right there. That's what I mean. See, I knew then. I was like, all these little ideas. I'm a songwriter, right? So I just went to work. And me and Carlos, man, we had a good time. We would laugh and carry on. And you know, suddenly 1 year turned into 2 years. And about the second year, it's like, what am I doing with my life? You know, I'm going to be 20 years old here pretty soon. I've been here 2 years. And I do remember an opportunity came up to go on a mission trip to Russia. Actually, Belarus. May as well have been Russia. And I went and talked to my boss about it. And he said, you need to go. You need to go do that for the Lord. He was a Christian man. I said, well, okay. He gave me 2 weeks off, and it was a 2-week mission trip. So that worked out good. And I went out there to Russia. And I'll probably tell that whole story in more detail in another episode. But I started seeing the world a bit, you know, and started thinking about things, zooming out a bit from my little life that I had going on. You know, our little routine of McDonald's on Tuesday and, you know, all these different just dumb things we did every day. And one day, they offered me a job to be a painter's helper and finally get me out of the wash pit. Well, I took them up on it. So they'd give me a little paint spray gun, and I'd sit there and spray bumpers and stuff with a mask on. And you know, I thought that was pretty cool. I'd spray clear coat on there. It was at a body shop. And these old good dudes that worked in the paint shop, they would tell me, they'd be like, Adam, now I had my guitar. So I'd play my guitar at lunch, and I'd sing songs I wrote at lunch for all them dudes. And they'd say, hey, son, you need to get out of here. And they weren't telling me I was talented or nothing like that. They weren't trying to encourage me as a talent. I really wasn't at the time, especially. It was just like, they were just like, hey, do yourself a favor and don't get old here. And I'll never forget that. Well, my buddy Parker, he decides he's going to move to Orlando. And he and I had been talking about getting an apartment together in Kernersville. And I was excited about that. But no, he's moving to Orlando. I said, who's in Orlando? He said, well, I know these people down there. I'm going to go work in their church. And I was like, well, okay. So he goes down there and you know, we talk on the phone sometimes. And he told me, he's like, hey, man, come visit anytime. I talked to the people I live with, and they said, come on down. I said, really? He said, yeah. I was like, well, where are you at again? And he told me, and I guess I pulled it up on randmcnally.com. I mean, back then, we didn't have smartphones, and I got off work, and I drove all the way down there. I didn't even bring clothes or nothing. I just drove straight from work to Orlando, and I thought I was the coolest cat in the world. I was like, I can't believe I just drove to Florida. You know, that was a big deal for me at that time. So here I come rolling in Orlando. And Parker's not there at the house. But this house is owned by a pastor and his wife and their family, their kids. And the pastor's wife, Miss Lori, was sitting up because she heard I was coming. She wanted to welcome me. I got there like 2 a.m. And she's like, so you're Parker's friend? I said, yes, ma'am. She's like, well, sit down right there. Let's talk. So we got to talking, and she was so sweet. And she was asking me all these questions, and nobody had ever asked me questions about like my life and what I wanted to do. And I was like, well, I kind of like to play music, but I don't really know how to do that. And she's like, well, you know, you just start by doing it. And she's telling me all this stuff and encouraging me. And she's like, just do it wherever you can. Coffee shops and churches and bars. And I said, bars? You think I should play bars? You're a pastor's wife. She said, well, absolutely. I mean, you're a good guy and God can use you in the world. And I just remember going, what? You mean you ain't going to talk me out of this like all the other ministry people I know? Which is a whole nother episode. And I remember that stuck with me. I was like, wow. And Parker came back from work. And it was 6 a.m. and we were still sitting there talking. So I spent the weekend down there. And Parker showed me a drum kit. He said, I've got drums now. and it wasn't his. It belonged to the Jeters, but he was playing it every day. And he said, I'm a drummer. Watch this. And he played, and I said, you got to be kidding. And I grabbed my guitar and plugged it into this little amp, and we started playing. And man, at that point I knew we have a rock and roll band. This is awesome. And suddenly I had something to live for outside of washing cars or going to McDonald's with my buddy. It was like, I'm going to go do this thing. But I was scared. And Parker said, why don't you move to Florida? I said, I don't know if I can do that. So I went back to North Carolina, and I went right back to that body shop. And I worked every day. That was August. September, October goes by, and it's early November. And all of a sudden, my phone rings. Not my phone, the work phone at the Toyota body shop, dealership right there. Adam Pope, you have a call, line 2. Adam Pope, you have a call, line 2. I'm sitting there spray painting a bumper. I go over there and pick up the phone, and it's Parker. Hey, man. I said, hey, what are you doing? He's like, hey, man, I got you a job. And see, the funny thing is, before I left Florida, I had told him, well, if I was going to move here, I would need me a job paying at least $10 an hour, and I would need me a place to live. Well, he called me. Here it is all these months later. I got you a job making you $10 an hour, and I got you a place to live. I said, what? He said, I do. He said, you can live with me at the Jeters. They've approved it. They like you. I said, you mean they'd let me just move in there with you? He goes, yeah, we'll have that apartment like we talked about. And I said, where would I work? He said, with me. I said, with you working? At where? He said, the Holy Land. I said, I'd be a security guard at the Holy Land. He said, yeah. And he said, here's my boss to make it real, just so you know this is real. And he put his boss on the phone, Keith. And Keith said, hey, Adam. He's like, yeah, man, I need an all-night security guard. He says, I could train a monkey to do this job. And Parker said, before I do that, I ought to call you. That's what the man told me. And I said, well, sir, you know what? I guess I need to think about it. He said, think about it. I need to know now. I said, well, yes, sir. Okay, I'll come. I'll do it. And I just couldn't believe I just jumped just like that. I felt like I was on the edge of a mountain. And I just jumped. And this man said, all right, well, I said, can I put in a 2-week notice? And can you give me that much time? He said, oh, yeah, absolutely. And so Parker got on the phone. He said, yeah, man, how about that? I said, wow. So we hung up, and I went in there to my boss, and I said, excuse me, sir, I got to put in my 2-week notice. And he about spit out his food he was sitting there eating. And he said, really? I said, yes, sir. I got the opportunity to move to Florida. And he said, you need to go. You need to do what God's called you to do. I just love all these people that God put in my life, just opening doors right and left. So of course he wasn't going to stop me, but it was cool. It was nice validation. So off to Florida I go. And I get down there and get to working on the job, and it's Mary Magdalene and the Jesus crucifixion and raising from the dead. And there's this other thing down there at the Holy Land called the scriptorium. And this thing was wild, man. So they tell me you got to walk through there and make sure all them doors are locked. And it locked with an Allen wrench. It was the wildest thing. So I had this Allen wrench walking through there. And inside this building, it was like artifacts from BC. The Nebuchadnezzar's scroll. All these look like rocks. I mean, big old... And I was just like, what? And I'd read it. I said, that thing was actually Nebuchadnezzar's? I mean, I guess they'd done all the research and found out it was. And so there was other like Bibles and early editions from, centuries ago. I mean, there was a Bible. I'll never forget it. There's one in there with blood on it. And they said blood from martyrs is on this Bible. Now, look, that could have been Kool-Aid and that could have been a good joke, but I just fell for it. I was like, wow, the blood of martyrs is on it. So I'm locking up this building with all these multi-million dollars worth of artifacts in here. And, it's crazy to me because anybody could have conked me in the head and just taken everything out of that place. But anyway, I locked that up and I'd hang out there and write them songs. And one night... See, I was determined. So me and Parker, I got to say, we practiced all the time in our little band that we started. And, oh, yeah, I got to tell you this. So we decided we needed to play a gig somewhere. You know, we were playing in the worship band at church, which that blew my mind too. Are you kidding me? A full band, drums and everything. This is my first time exposed to a rock and roll band at church, because, you know, the churches I grew up in, man, they didn't allow drums. No drums. We ain't gonna have no heavy beat. We ain't gonna have no rock and roll music up in here. We ain't like a bunch of liberals. Well, that's what I came from. So here I am, and I'm having a blast in this band. And, you know, they're doing worship songs. So it was wild, man. Wild to me at the time. What's normal to other people was completely blowing my mind. So me and Parker are like, I got us a gig. He goes, where? I got it at I think it was called Jalopy Joe's. I'm pretty sure it's what it was called. Jalopy Joe's. A biker bar outside of Apopka, Florida. We knew the owner. He went to church there. The owner of the biker bar went to the church. So we were like, sweet. What? Really? We can get a gig there? He said, yeah, I'll give you a prime time. Wednesday at 1 p.m. You know, okay. Well, that's fine. Okay. So we go there. I was like, well, what does it pay? Well, it's just for tips. Oh, that's fine. Okay. We'll pay you, you know. So we go there, and it's just me, and it's just Parker. And there's a big old drum kit already there. And I plugged my guitar in. Man, we didn't know anything about a sound system. But somehow we got it turned on and got in there and got the playing. And I remember there were 2 bikers there drinking at the bar. Boy, I was very scared. I was like, I've seen this in them Clint Eastwood movies I've been watching in the guard shack. And there was a huge rebel flag behind us. And so we're sitting there playing. And I'm doing like Folsom Prison. I'm trying to entertain these guys, because I think, man, they'll like me if I sing this song about killing the man in Reno. And I don't know no bikers. I'd never been on no bike. The only thing I rode was my bicycle. So here's these guys over here, big beards and tattoos and smoking, and they're looking at us. And we finished Folsom Prison, and one of them kind of slow clapped, and the other one said, all right. I was like, yeah, man, that's right. That's right. We're on our way. So me and Parker, man, we had confidence. So we went over there to the Sam Ash Music Store, and we saw a sign in the door, and it said, Battle of the Bands. And I said, Battle of the Band? We got to do that. He goes, oh, man. He's like, we'll kill it at the Battle of the Bands. And we're both like looking at this thing, like, for sure, dude. Like, we got this. We're like high-fiving. Dude, and look, we can win like 10 grand. Oh my gosh. Like, can you imagine a record deal? Like, I don't know if that was on there, but I mean, that's what we thought, right? So we're like, dude, we're on our way. This is it. We're going to kill it. So we joined the Battle of the Bands, and we're like, we should get a bass player. And I said, your brother plays bass in North Carolina. He goes, yeah, let's call him. So we called him up, and he's like, yeah, man, I'll do it. We called Ben, the bass player, not the Ben that talked me into this podcast. That's a different Ben. So Ben Manuel goes, yeah, I'm there, man. That's awesome. And we're like, dude, we got a band. We got a full band, the 3 of us. Well, all of a sudden, Ben calls in the day before Battle of the Bands, says, I can't make it. And we're like, dang, man. We're like, it's fine. We'll kill it anyway. So we go up there to the Battle of the Bands, and we get there and look, and there's an 8-piece band before we play. And I said, who is that guy with the cowboy hat and that awesome band? I said, who is that? And somebody said, well, that's the Weatherman. I said, wow, the Weatherman's got a good band up there. Good gosh. So when they got done, here we come. And they said, where's your third person? We go, well, he couldn't make it. And they went, oh. They said, so you don't have a bass player? We said, no. And they said, you just going to do it with just you two? And we said, yeah. And they said, well, there's a bass player over there. And they pointed at a guy with a big old beard, and he held a beer up in the air. And me and Parker looked at each other and looked at him and said, well, come on and play with us. And he said, all right. It might have been the same guy from the biker bar. So he brought his bass over there, and I don't know what he played. I didn't even know what a good or bad bass player was. All I know is we took off, man. And we went through, we sang Sold at the Grundy County auction. I did Folsom Prison, Heartbreak Hotel. We did a few original songs, and boy, that bass player was really confused when we did them. But we thought we had this thing in the bag, and we came in 7th out of 40 or 45 bands, which still blows my mind because we sucked terribly bad. At the time, we thought we were awesome. So I don't know how we came in that high, but me and Parker had this saying back then. We would see something incredible, and we knew, well, that's really good. And we would look at each other and go, we can entertain, though. Can they entertain like we can? So that was kind of our fallback. So I really think there was something to that. So, all right, now I'm thinking I'm moving to Nashville now. All right, I got to go to Nashville. Parker says he ain't going. He's going to Liberty University. He's going into ministry, but for now, he likes playing drums for me. I'm like, okay, it's good enough. So now I'm just trying to get the nerve to go to Nashville. And one night, I'm there at the Holy Land, and all of a sudden, this go to Nashville dream, it suddenly feels like I'm rebelling against the Lord. And I go, hold on, I don't like that feeling. What is that all about? And so I started praying and said, Lord, I'm planning on going to Nashville. I've met these wonderful Christian people. They seem to support that. I thought you supported that. I thought you put that in my heart. Why do I suddenly feel like I shouldn't do it? And I start really struggling with it. And I feel this conviction from the Holy Spirit. Do not go to Nashville. And I wrestled with it for a few days. And one night when I was walking around at the Holy Land there, I just will never forget the keys dangling off my belt loop as I walked through the park with a flashlight and was praying fervently that God would not take this from me. And finally, I just surrendered. I said, but Lord, if you don't want me to do it, I won't do it. And I don't know what you have for me, but I will give this dream to you. Now, I had a notebook full of songs I'd written in the guard shack back there. And I remember looking at them and flipping through it and thinking, what do I do with this? What about this? Because to me, it's either go to Nashville or this is irrelevant. You know, that was the way I had it in my head. And about the time that I prayed that prayer, I looked over at them animals. And normally they were asleep. But this particular moment, one of the sheep was walking around. And it looked at me. And there was light. Because there's always light in that area. It's not like it suddenly came out of nowhere. But he was standing in the light. And it really jumped out at me that this lamb was standing there. And it reminded me of Abraham and Isaac. And here, Abraham had been praying for a son, him and Sarah. And after all of these years, God finally answers his prayer and gives him the desires of his heart. And it's the desires of God's heart that Abraham have a son and be the father of the great nation of Israel. And yet, God tells Abraham, I want you to sacrifice and kill your son. And Abraham, I'm sure, had to have some kind of argument with this. This doesn't make sense. You got to be kidding me. I'm misreading this. But sure enough, Abraham obeyed the Lord and gave Isaac to God with the act of taking him up on the mountain to sacrifice him. Now, this sounds like a wild story when you consider it literally, but I believe it to be literal. And in that moment, God provided Abraham with a lamb. Now, maybe I have that story wrong. Maybe it was a goat, but I'll have to go look. But all I know is when I experienced sacrificing my dream and giving it to God, I think that might have been the first time in my young life that I actually surrendered to the Lord. And right away, I understood what God was doing. He was teaching me to surrender to his will. Well, there's more to this story, but I can tell you that right now, I'm finishing this episode in downtown Nashville on my way to a gig. And God gave me the dream. He gave me everything that I had been thinking of, but it didn't go the way I thought it would. At that time, though, I was on the cusp. And that's what this podcast is about. So I'll wrap up this story on a future episode.